What could make this damaged Bugatti turn into a mechanical mystery? And why does fixing a hypercar demand far more than money? Could one overlooked component explain why this machine needs serious attention? The deeper question is whether ordinary maintenance rules even apply here. So what happens when specialists finally investigate this complicated Bugatti properly? And will the hidden problems prove worse than anyone initially expected? With the car inside, the investigation begins beyond its intimidating appearance. Attention quickly shifts toward maintenance details that ordinary owners rarely encounter. Even familiar service procedures become expensive puzzles on machinery this specialized. One component reveals just how unusually engineered this Bugatti really is. The mechanic starts comparing parts instead of blindly trusting replacement recommendations. That comparison matters because specialized branding can dramatically change repair costs. He keeps examining alternatives, looking for engineering similarities beneath different packaging. Another exotic car nearby reinforces how specialized this workshop's work has become. Back underneath, the Bugatti exposes components hidden deep inside its complex structure. Boxes of replacement parts show this investigation has moved beyond simple inspection. The mechanic keeps explaining why careful identification matters before replacing anything expensive. A removed filter provides physical evidence that can compare against alternatives. Online research then becomes another tool for decoding the mysterious component. Patent information suggests specialized designs can remain commercially protected for years. Parts listings reveal how visually similar components may carry very different prices. Placed together, the filters make those similarities impossible to ignore. Now the investigation returns underneath, where theory must survive real installation. Accessing the underside shows why even basic servicing demands serious workshop equipment. The mechanic pauses to explain another detail before moving deeper into repairs. A small component becomes surprisingly important once its function is properly understood. Even the fluid choice matters when tolerances and operating conditions are extreme. Rather than guessing, he keeps connecting each service decision to engineering requirements. A tiny metal assembly demonstrates how complicated seemingly simple maintenance can become. Cleaning supplies come out because contamination could compromise the next comparison. Underneath again, the replacement process begins carefully around tightly packaged mechanical hardware. Close inspection confirms there is little room for careless hands here. With the car lifted, another technician joins the increasingly detailed teardown. The removed assembly is examined closely before anyone decides what failed. Its construction provides clues about how the system controls pressure and flow. He demonstrates the mechanism, turning an obscure part into understandable engineering. The component's mounting location also explains why replacement labor becomes complicated. Technical diagrams help verify exactly how this assembly interacts with surrounding systems. Another Bugatti example provides useful context for understanding the same mechanical layout. Back in the workshop, the mechanic compares physical parts against researched information. Holding the assembly closer reveals details that product photos cannot fully explain. An exploded diagram finally connects individual pieces into one functioning system. Online listings then expose alternative sources for remarkably similar-looking components. The comparison raises an obvious question about genuine engineering versus expensive branding. Opening the mechanism allows them to judge its construction instead of appearance. Piece by piece, the internal design becomes much less mysterious. Careful disassembly continues because one damaged seal could invalidate the whole experiment. A replacement part is presented as the investigation reaches its practical test. The team compares both versions directly, checking whether dimensions truly correspond. Matching details strengthen the possibility that expensive exclusivity may be partly superficial. Measurements become essential because visual similarity alone cannot guarantee safe compatibility. The mechanism is manipulated carefully to understand how its moving sections behave. Another technician exposes internal electrical components, adding evidence to their comparison. Copper windings reveal that this compact assembly contains an electrically driven mechanism. Installation begins once the team understands enough to proceed, without blind experimentation. The component disappears into cramped machinery, where access becomes the next challenge. With installation underway, the mechanic explains what their comparison has demonstrated. He returns to the exposed area, checking everything before final assembly. Small pieces receive the same scrutiny because tiny differences can create major failures. The technical lesson becomes clear. Compatibility requires evidence, not just confidence. He emphasizes another detail that could separate a successful repair from disaster. With both technicians present, their findings are compared before moving forward. Elsewhere, another mechanic brings additional hardware into the investigation for comparison. The discussion becomes lighter, though the expensive mechanical problem remains very real. They inspect another assembly, searching for clues hidden inside its construction. The component is passed around as everyone evaluates what makes it different. Back at the Bugatti, installation resumes with their earlier research guiding decisions. The mechanic explains the next step before sealing away difficult-to-access hardware. Behind the bodywork, the system's dense packaging becomes especially obvious. A circular mechanical section appears, revealing another layer beneath the exterior. The mechanic prepares a fluid product needed before the system can operate properly. He works around the exposed rear, carefully servicing components hidden from owners. Connections are secured because one loose fitting could undo hours of work. The final checks continue around the open compartment before everything gets covered. He pauses again, summarizing what this unusually complicated repair has taught them. More people gather around, showing how much attention this project now demands. With cleaning underway, the workshop prepares the Bugatti for another mechanical stage. Underbody hardware comes back into focus as maintenance continues beneath the car. A drivetrain illustration helps viewers understand what cannot be seen during servicing. Another small filter-like piece suggests this hypercar relies on multiple specialized systems. Fluid drains from underneath, proving routine maintenance here still requires unusual access. Fresh fluid is prepared carefully before the service system is refilled. The mechanic checks the underside again, making sure nothing important was overlooked. A product listing offers another price comparison for an otherwise ordinary-looking fluid. Next come the spark plugs, opening another chapter in the Bugatti service. Their condition can reveal valuable clues about combustion inside the massive engine. Comparing plugs closely helps identify wear patterns instead of replacing them blindly. Lined together, the used plugs reveal how consistently the cylinders have operated. Another Bugatti reference reminds us these components serve an extraordinary powertrain. The exposed engine shows why reaching every plug demands patience and precision. Old and replacement parts are organized carefully before installation begins again. Each new component must match specification before returning to this demanding engine. By the end, careful research proves as important as expensive replacement parts. Could one tiny ignition part really keep this Bugatti from running perfectly? And how do you diagnose 16 cylinders without wasting a fortune? What if replacing obvious parts still leaves the real problem hidden? This repair will test whether careful diagnosis beats expensive guesswork. But can ordinary-looking components really tame such an extraordinary engine? Before anything gets installed, every replacement must survive one crucial check. The new ignition coils are lined up, ready for their demanding assignment. Because this Bugatti packs 16 cylinders, even simple maintenance becomes serious work. With the car already opened up, the repair moves beyond routine servicing. Deep inside, the massive engine reveals why access consumes so much labor. The technician explains the challenge before committing more parts and workshop hours. Much of the Bugatti is dismantled simply to reach buried components safely. From this angle, the scale of the disassembly becomes impossible to ignore. Even underneath, tightly packed engineering leaves almost no convenient working space. Every hidden fastener proves why exotic car labor can quickly outweigh parts costs. Online research now supports the physical inspection instead of relying on assumptions. Technical information helps narrow possibilities before another expensive component gets disturbed. Underneath, the Bugatti's complexity makes systematic diagnosis more valuable than blind replacement. Reference images offer another clue, connecting symptoms with components buried around the chassis. With the likely trouble area identified, attention returns to the stripped Bugatti. Now the technician can explain why the next checks matter before reassembly. Rather than rushing, he keeps diagnosis ahead of replacement throughout the repair. Another technician joins in, turning the investigation into a coordinated workshop effort. The exposed engine bay gives them direct access to otherwise unreachable systems. Together they review progress, making sure the next move actually solves something. Carbon panels remain displaced because reaching the engine still takes priority. Diagnostic equipment enters the process, getting electronic evidence alongside mechanical inspection. Armed with data, they return to the engine instead of chasing random faults. Each check reduces uncertainty while protecting this extremely costly powertrain from mistakes. Even repositioning the car becomes part of creating enough room to work. The technician pauses to explain what their testing has revealed so far. Under the raised car, another component becomes accessible for closer examination. Removing the housing exposes hardware that could influence the engine's troublesome behavior. The removed piece gets inspected before anyone decides whether replacement is justified. Then the Bugatti's cockpit becomes the next place to verify their diagnosis. From the driver's seat, electronic behavior can be checked against workshop findings. Controls are tested carefully, looking for evidence that the system responds correctly. The dashboard provides immediate feedback while the technician watches for abnormal signals. Each response helps separate an electrical issue from a deeper mechanical failure. With cabin testing complete, attention shifts back toward the exposed engine systems. A connector is carefully released because damaged wiring could create misleading symptoms. The small sensor looks insignificant, yet its information can affect engine behavior dramatically. Connections are checked individually, reducing the chance that one loose contact survives. The technician compares components directly instead of assuming the removed part failed. Careful handling matters here, since one damaged connector creates another expensive problem. Another fitting is examined closely before the system gets put back together. This methodical process turns tiny details into evidence rather than expensive guesses. Once connections are secured, the engine bay starts moving toward functional testing. The team reviews the situation, knowing one overlooked fault could undo everything. Work continues around the exposed powertrain while each technician checks assigned areas. A second opinion helps confirm the engine is ready for the next test. Discussion around the Bugatti keeps the diagnosis grounded in evidence from testing. They compare observations before deciding whether the repair has actually changed anything. With preparations complete, the moment arrives to test their work under power. Back inside, the technician prepares to see whether the Bugatti behaves differently. The engine response brings encouraging signs, but one successful moment proves little. The exposed rear remains unfinished while functional testing takes priority over cosmetics. Dashboard readings are watched again, searching for faults returning under operation. The technician listens and watches closely, judging whether the engine now runs consistently. Back at the computer, recorded information gives the team something objective to compare. The latest data now determines whether more dismantling is necessary or avoidable. With the rear still open, further checks remain easy before panels return. Another cockpit test verifies that the earlier improvement wasn't just temporary. Diagnostic results are reviewed again, keeping confidence tied to measurable evidence. The investigation is finally narrowing, and unnecessary replacement becomes less likely. A fresh explanation connects the electronic findings with what the engine actually did. Another start test puts that theory under pressure where speculation cannot hide. The W16 sits exposed, making this an ideal moment for final verification. The technicians compare impressions, looking for anything that still feels abnormal. Their discussion shifts from finding faults toward confirming the repair's reliability. One more close inspection guards against celebrating before every connection is secure. The technician summarizes their reasoning, turning a complicated repair into understandable logic. A buried sensor line shows how easily airflow information can become misleading. Technical animation explains how pulsations can influence what sensitive airflow sensors detect. That insight gives the earlier symptoms a more convincing engineering explanation. With diagnosis clearer, the engine can finally progress toward careful reassembly. Panels begin returning only after the important mechanical checks have been completed. Small mounting points receive attention because poor fitment can damage expensive bodywork. Reassembly requires several hands, especially around large lightweight carbon components. The team aligns the rear structure carefully before tightening anything permanently. Fitment is checked repeatedly, ensuring mechanical success doesn't create cosmetic problems. Even tiny clips matter when body panels must sit perfectly at speed. With major pieces aligned, the Bugatti finally starts resembling a complete car again. The technician reflects on progress, but another bodywork challenge still remains. Attention moves from engine work toward restoring the Bugatti's exterior properly. Old blue wrapping is peeled away, exposing the original white finish beneath. The door is stripped further, revealing mechanisms normally hidden behind finished trim. Removed exterior pieces show how much disassembly cosmetic restoration can require. Adhesive residue demands patient cleanup before the white bodywork can look right. Around the mirror area, stubborn material is removed without harming surrounding surfaces. A phone reference helps verify details before the final exterior pieces return. The Bugatti now looks dramatically cleaner, though finishing work is still underway. Why strip a Bugatti this far when the body already looks finished? Could one hidden problem justify removing panels worth a small fortune? And what are these expensive body pieces actually hiding underneath? The deeper they inspect, the less this looks like cosmetic restoration. So what problem has forced the mechanic beneath that polished exterior? More importantly, can careful diagnosis prevent an extremely expensive mistake? With panels removed, attention shifts toward the Bugatti's exposed mechanical systems. That access matters because tightly packaged supercars leave technicians almost no room. Now the mechanic begins tracing components rather than replacing parts blindly. Underneath, every connection becomes another clue in the ongoing diagnosis. He checks the exposed hardware carefully, narrowing down what actually needs attention. This methodical approach matters when unnecessary Bugatti parts can cost thousands. A removed intake component finally gives the investigation something more specific. Instead of guessing, he studies the component before deciding what comes next. Its twin openings reveal how precisely the engine manages incoming airflow. Even simple-looking plastic hardware can influence how this massive engine behaves. A replacement airflow sensor proves the solution itself can be surprisingly affordable. He compares the small sensor closely, confirming the correct part before installation. That tiny component highlights why diagnosis matters more than simply buying expensive parts. Once fitted, the new sensor becomes part of the Bugatti's breathing system. With that issue addressed, attention returns to the much larger mechanical picture. The stripped rear end shows just how deeply this repair has progressed. Nothing is hidden now, making inspection easier but exposing the job's complexity. And the next stage takes them even deeper into the Bugatti's hardware. Removed components are organized carefully, preventing expensive confusion during eventual reassembly. Each connection is checked because one overlooked seal could create another problem. The exposed engine reminds us this machine packs enormous complexity into limited space. Fresh filters are prepared, giving the huge engine cleaner air to breathe. Installing them now makes sense, while normally inaccessible areas remain completely exposed. Routine maintenance becomes far easier when major bodywork is already out of sight. The second filter follows, completing another sensible job during this major teardown. But maintenance soon gives way to something far heavier beneath the car. At the rear, the enormous exhaust assembly becomes the next major target. Its size explains why removing it requires planning rather than brute force. Extra hands support the assembly, while fasteners are carefully released from underneath. Finally freed, the huge exhaust reveals how much hardware hides behind bodywork. Beside it, upgraded pipework shows a dramatically different approach to exhaust flow. The lighter-looking system replaces bulky factory sections with far more direct plumbing. Held together, the contrast makes the scale of this modification immediately obvious. Yet fitting performance hardware still demands accuracy, not simply swapping shiny pipes. The original exhaust sits aside, emphasizing just how substantial the removed assembly is. Now connections are prepared carefully before the replacement system can take its place. Piece by piece, the new pipework begins filling the space left behind. That tighter layout should reduce restriction while keeping everything securely positioned. With installation progressing, the mechanic pauses to explain what has changed underneath. The Bugatti remains stripped, but its mechanical transformation is finally taking shape. He walks through the work, connecting each modification to the larger repair strategy. Then comes the moment every major teardown eventually needs, testing the machine. From the driver's seat, systems are checked before trusting everything under load. Back in the workshop, the exposed Bugatti still has several checks remaining. The rear structure stays accessible so nothing gets buried before verification is complete. Raised securely, the car gives technicians room to inspect their work underneath. The new exhaust now sits installed where the bulky factory assembly once lived. A second Bugatti outside offers perspective on how complete these cars normally appear. Meanwhile, even a tiny electrical fuse becomes important when troubleshooting complex systems. The team tests it rather than assuming appearance alone proves electrical continuity. That simple demonstration captures the whole repair philosophy. Verify before replacing anything. With filters and components laid out, the scale of servicing becomes clearer. The mechanic can finally laugh, because the difficult work is largely behind them. Even the cost comparison shows why smart, independent repair can dramatically change ownership. And with the team smiling, careful diagnosis has once again beaten expensive